Hello there. Welcome into a Monday edition of the show. So glad to have you, whether you're listening on your radio, streaming the show online at extrasports1300.com, or you've downloaded the Extra Sports 1300 app to do your listening. And that app, which is free to download and free to use, is sponsored by Versus Health, mental health and well-being for all. It will be a veritable cornucopia of sports topics over the course of the program. We got Monday Night Football, our coverage beginning at 5, and I will label today's show a recap of Statement Weekend, because I feel like the idea of teams making a statement, either a Colorado team making a statement or a team making a statement at the expense of a Colorado team, is really the conversation today. And I welcome your thoughts on any of the three of them. 719-247-1313. Corey Roldan from KKTV will join me in the next segment, but the rest of the time it's you and me. So let's start with the statement win made at the expense of a team that calls this state home. The Jaguars beating the Denver Broncos 34-20. But it was bound to happen, right? The Broncos weren't going to win 17 consecutive games and hoist a Lombardi trophy. You could feel it as much as I did that there's just no way that the Broncos were going to win every game from here on out, including all what would be right now 3 of their playoff games. Teams don't do that in one season. What the Broncos would be lining up. But you may be surprised, and I wouldn't blame you because I am a little bit, that the winning streak came to an end yesterday, that particular game. But it's not about necessarily the margin of victory for the Jaguars that surprises me. It's the timing of it all, and I'll get further into it. But let's start with how lopsided that game was, because it was very lopsided. 2-touchdown game, that's pretty lopsided by NFL standards. But a team that wins as many close games as the Denver Broncos do, walks that fine line, lives on the razor's edge, if you like. When it comes to an end, it usually comes to an end in spectacular fashion. And this is a prophecy that I have foretold on previous episodes of this program. I have said that when it comes to an end, whenever that might be, it's going to be bad. And it's because of the way that the Broncos keep winning games. May I remind you what happened to the team that was talked about in much the same way the Denver Broncos are this year, the Kansas City Chiefs of last year. Right? Maybe it ended at a point that was later than some people thought it would be, the Super Bowl, but when it ended in spectacular fashion. They got blown out by the Philadelphia Eagles in that Super Bowl. So it was bound to happen even in that way. That was a complete and utter breakdown of everything the Denver Broncos are and have made themselves out to be, which is most notably being better than their opponent in the most important situations. Right? You want to give a Cliff Notes version. You want to boil it down to brass tacks for somebody who may not watch the Denver Broncos. Why are they where they are right now as the number 1 seed in the AFC? Because in the most important moments of the game, they're better. That's what they've built their 11-game winning streak on, their entire season on, is that they are better when it matters the most. And they weren't yesterday in any of those situations. Best red zone defense in the NFL gives up 4 touchdowns inside the 20. The Jaguars were 8 for 15 on third down. The Broncos just 5 for 14. The Broncos turned it over twice. Bo Nix did that thing where he feels invincible, so he stares down a receiver and throws it right to the guy that's covering him. You've seen that from Bo Nix before. He did that, which basically killed any chance the Broncos had to come back in that game, however minute. And in the fourth quarter, no less. Right? Another one of those situations where the Broncos, more often than not, are the better team. They missed a field goal. When's the last time Will Lutz missed a field goal? The penalties, now that's nothing new. Still one of the most penalized teams in the NFL. 6 penalties for 61 yards on Sunday. But it just, even though that's not a new phenomenon, it just adds to, how bad this team was within those margins that they're normally so good in. Why I'm surprised about that game yesterday is because Sean Payton last week talked about how similar the mindset and the preparation was going into the Jacksonville game as it was going into the Green Bay game. And I said this as recently as Friday, the way that I kind of see the Broncos winning streak, because I did think it was going to end before the regular season was over. But I thought it would be a situation that checked a few of the following boxes. On the road, lesser team, and the Broncos having less to play for. Basically, I thought it would be this Thursday. That's the game that I thought was more likely to end the Broncos winning streak than yesterday. And now, not just because the Broncos lost yesterday, but because of the state of affairs with the Kansas City Chiefs, I certainly don't feel that way now. In fact, I feel quite the opposite about what the Denver Broncos are about to do to the Kansas City Chiefs on Thursday. But I thought, or even the Charger game, right? Who knows? Broncos could have had everything sewn up. And even at home, playing a Charger team that's good, they've beaten them before, right? But the Chargers maybe having a little bit more on the line than the Denver Broncos. Those are kind of the situations where I thought at this point would be more likely to trip up the Denver Broncos. It seems like they went into the Jacksonville game with eyes wide open. And I don't know that yesterday was a matter of overconfidence. For it to happen, for this win streak to come to an end in that fashion against a team that could conceivably catch them for the number 1 overall seed, or that they could see again in the playoffs, that is the surprising part of all of this, especially given what Sean Payton said leading up to it. You didn't get a lot of indication that this was a Broncos team that was looking past Jacksonville, that wasn't concerned with Jacksonville. Sean Payton hit every item on the checklist of why this Jacksonville team could be tricky. And coming off the performance that they had against Green Bay, it's not like this never happens in sports. I just think it's more likely to happen. I'll give you an example. Well, The Cincinnati game would be a parallel, the way I felt about the Cincinnati game. But the reason why I thought that the Broncos would turn around and have a really tough day against Philadelphia, which they didn't, was because of how lackluster they were in the second half of that football game. So that's not even a direct comparison to what we saw yesterday, because the Broncos were good for all 4 quarters against Green Bay. That was their most complete performance of the year. So while you could imagine a bit of a letdown, not for the pendulum to swing completely the other way, for it to be a complete 180, you would think it would be a game that the Broncos escaped by the skin of their teeth, didn't look overly great doing it, and then they run up against a good team that beats them by 2 touchdowns. That's the way in my mind I saw this going for the Denver Broncos in terms of their winning streak coming to an end. But again, the fact that they were under no misconception about Jacksonville, what they brought to the table, where the pain points were in this matchup, and how Sean Payton said it was so similar, the messaging, the preparation the week leading up to Green Bay, maybe that fed some overconfidence on the Broncos' part. But I really don't think it's that. I really don't think it was a team overlooking Jacksonville. And therein lies why yesterday can't just be shrugged off. Because when you get beat that soundly, especially when you're a good team, which the Broncos are, it's easy to just go, not our day. Now, that would be the case under my scenario, in which the Broncos, coming off of a big win against Jacksonville, short week, go into Arrowhead on Christmas for a team that is absolutely dead in the water, and they have their mind on other things, and the Chiefs catch them. Right? That would have been a loss that I would have returned from my little holiday break and said, don't sweat it. Don't sweat it. You had every reason to overlook Kansas City. They had no reason to overlook Jacksonville. So the fact that they got beat that soundly is cause for a bit of concern here. It can't just be shrugged off, or I'll just let Sean Payton tell you how he framed it yesterday.
You can't spit it out. You got to swallow it, and that starts with every one of us.
Okay. I like mine better. Pause, right? That's what somebody would say after Sean Payton said something like that yesterday. Let's go with the shrugging it off or laughing it off. Let's do that. Let's not. Yeah, let's leave what Payton said there. The way I imagined the Broncos winning streak coming to an end, if it were to happen during the regular season, I think you could, in some ways, especially if it was Thursday, say, look, it's not reflective of who this team is. It's not cause for concern, because you're still resolute in where the Broncos would be, as opposed to, a completely eliminated onto their third quarterback Kansas City Chiefs team. But Jacksonville's not that. You lose like that to a division-leading Jaguars team, it has to give you pause. Just a little bit. Right? The good news is, barring unforeseen catastrophe, any matchup in the playoffs between the Denver Broncos and the Jacksonville Jaguars will take place at Mile High. And the Broncos will have this game on their minds. Right? So that's the good thing about it. But some of what Jacksonville does, and I'll get into this a little bit later, like it gets the Broncos where they are most vulnerable. In addition to just the fact that the Jaguars are a good football team, right? There are some aspects of this team that give the Broncos problems. So I can't sit here and say I called it that the Broncos would lose to Jacksonville because I thought that they would win. But I did, in saying that, identify, as did Sean Payton, some of the reasons why Jacksonville would be a tricky matchup. And the thing about it is all of that came together. You have to give the Jaguars a lot of credit. They knew where they could beat the Denver Broncos, and they did it. And so if these two teams were to meet up in the playoffs, different circumstances, I grant you, and I still think that you could lean Denver in that hypothetical matchup. But there were things in that game that are hard to brush off, that are hard to ignore. Jacksonville might be a tough matchup for the Denver Broncos if they were to meet in the postseason. Take your thoughts. 719-247-1313. An overconfident Denver team or a bad matchup? Or option C, the Broncos were exposed as complete frauds. I'm not choosing C, but you might. 719-247-1313. I'll see what Corey Roldan of KKTV thinks coming up next. Well, it was bound to happen. The winning streak had to come to an end at some point for the Denver Broncos. Maybe you weren't expecting for it to be on Sunday, but that's the way it went down. 34-20, Jacksonville over Denver. Not the first time that a plucky Jacksonville team has come into Mile High to take on a team receiving Super Bowl hype and shocking everybody. Ambush at Mile High, I believe, is what that was called back in 1997. Joining me now to discuss what happened yesterday is Corey Roldan of KKTV. Corey, first of all, how expectant were you that Sunday was going to be the day that the Broncos winning streak came to an end?
Well, we all certainly knew, Ryan, that this was a possibility. Trevor Lawrence playing his best football of his NFL career, former number one pick, and he had 6 touchdowns versus the Jets. We certainly knew that the Jags were red hot, had a chip on their shoulder. Sean Payton's comments about them being a small market team probably did not help. But was I expecting it? To me, I feel like the Broncos knew what was on the line. You win 2 games and you're a number one seed and you get a bye. But the Jags wanted it more. This was their kind of Eagles game or Chiefs game that the Broncos had. This was their signature win to show, hey, we're for real. And Trevor Lawrence played really well. The defense for the Jags is great on third down and created turnovers.
So would you say that because the margin of defeat, I think, would lead some people to kind of go, yeah, it was Jacksonville's biggest game, to your point, no big deal. Do you think that there were some aspects of yesterday that are reason for concern if you're a Broncos fan?
Yeah, there's a couple missed tackles. Riley Moss had a couple. He played well in the first quarter, and then Parker Washington, didn't know him before the game. I know him now. 146 yards and 8 catches, and he was a yak machine out there. The third downs of the Broncos, they were number one in the NFL in the previous weeks, and they got 8 for 15. There's a lot of coverage bust, and you could probably attribute that to Brandon Jones not being out there as well. So there is some concerns defensively. Offensively, I thought Bo Nix played well in the first half, and I think RJ Harvey was running well. So I actually have less concerns the first time all season. I have less concerns about the offense and the defense.
Corey Roldan, KKTV, my guest. I know I'm asking you in the moment, and that might influence your answer, but let's fast forward. Let's say these two teams meet again. The better quarterback in that game would be who?
Trevor Lawrence. More experience. Yeah, I would just say he has more experience than Bo Nix. And just watching him yesterday, man, Lawrence was dicing up that defense. And it wasn't – the Broncos outgained the Jags by a good bit. And it didn't matter because Lawrence – he almost played perfect, honestly. Now, the Broncos had some silly penalties. 2 of them I disagree with. The first one was on P.J. Locke when we could not hear the whistle. We could not hear it on the field. So when he hit Trevor Lawrence, and the Broncos think they got a fumble because we did not hear the whistle. That's 15 yards. And then the Malcolm Roach roughing the passer that led to another touchdown was ridiculous as well. But Trevor Lawrence played really good. So right now, I would say he's the better quarterback right now. It's close. It's very close.
How would you describe the atmosphere both outside of the locker room in terms of I got to imagine there was at least a little bit of shock from the fan base, and then in the post-game locker room as well.
The players are certainly a lot more upset than the fans. They were frustrated. Disappointed by their performance, but the good news for them, like they mentioned, it's a short week, so they got to kind of forget about it and move on to play against a Chiefs team that is playing their third string quarterback and having you as their backup. So, uh, yeah, so they got to kind of forget about it and move on to
Mhm.
Christmas.
Where was Nick Benito yesterday?
Benito said in his words that he played like doo doo.
Mm.
Okay. Nick Benito, that was the least impactful I've seen Nick Benito. Really, Jonathan Cooper as
Yeah,
well, if
I
you
was
want to be
just going to
honest.
say Anna Ellis was probably their most effective
And
pass
Q
rusher.
Robinson.
And
And
Q
Q
Robinson.
Robinson.
Yeah.
Q Robinson was really good. Up front, they got a lot of pressure. John Franklin Myers was playing like a
Yeah.
madman. So was Malcolm Roach. So yeah, I mean, it's just the edge, the tackles of the Jags did a really good job. You got to give them credit. Trevor Lawrence got the ball out quick.
Mhm.
Really quick. He made simple reads, got out quick. And it wasn't like he had a running game because the Broncos shut down ETN in that running game. The best part of their running game was Trevor Lawrence on the zone reads. But Nick Benito, Jonathan Cooper, they're
Mhm.
missing right now because that's what their tackles did.
Is there any level of doubt in your mind that the Broncos end up with the number 1 seed?
There's a lot of doubt in my mind, honestly, because what team has given Sean Payton since he's been here the most problems?
LA.
The Chargers. Justin Herbert is on fire right now. Herbert's playing like he did the first 3 weeks of the season, looking like an MVP, and this is with traffic cones as their tackles. Now, the Broncos would have to get pressure on Herbert, but I think their game plan and Harbaugh know they got to run the ball and get it out quick. That game is going to be a massive. This is like that game could be like you potentially could go to a Super Bowl or you could be one and done in the playoffs.
I don't think you're wrong on that. Certainly, I think you and I are in agreement that Thursday won't be much of a hurdle for the boys after what
It's
happened.
dude like that
Yeah.
next Sunday or Saturday in
Mhm.
in early January is the biggest game as Sean Payton as a Bronco, and it's not close because that game you could be the number one seed and everything runs through Denver, which you had your first loss since October of last year. Bo Nix is playing well, or your season because like the Broncos yesterday for the first time all year, Ryan, went off the rails, right?
Mhm.
They had those penalties that were a little fluky. They got mad, started missing tackles, and then the offense got flustered because they were all of a sudden down 2 scores. They start turning over the football. So they went off the rails. This season could go off the rails, and I don't mean a doomsday. I know it's one loss, but if you got to win the next 2 games, you have to.
Yeah, because you're looking at a situation, and I think a lot of Broncos fans are watching Sunday Night Football going, why, Ravens, why couldn't you close out New England? I think Ravens fans are also wondering why they can't close out the Patriots. But you're looking at a situation to your
Jackson is a big reason why, but
yeah,
I'm sorry.
and yeah, and not running Derrick Henry. That would
100%.
be another reason. But to your point, like you lose again. I think New England's got what the Jets and the Dolphins coming up. So you lose the number 1 seed, and now it goes through Foxborough, which isn't an easy place to play. And now you have the thing with the Jags now in play, where you could drop all the way to the 3 seed, and now you're looking at what, Buffalo? Well, maybe not. Buffalo's the 5th seed.
My,
Houston.
my concern, I don't think you're losing Thursday. Okay. But if you
Right, but
lose in 2 weeks,
right.
you go from the 1 seed to the 6 seed going to Jacksonville.
Oh,
I don't, that's where
yeah,
it,
because the Chargers would get them too.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's what I'm sitting here, 'cause maybe the Chargers lose and the Broncos um win Thursday and the Chargers lose to the Texans. But that Chargers
Yeah.
team is playing so well right now. That game, and I think the Broncos will be favored. I think the Broncos will have a chip on their shoulder. And if I had to guess right now, I think they would win. But if you win next week and lose, and the Chargers win next week and you lose to the Chargers at home, you will drop to the 6th seed in the AFC, and you would be going to either LA or Jacksonville in round one.
Yeah. And two teams that either
Because the
one have
Bills would
swept
have the
you, yeah.
tiebreaker over them.
That's right. Yeah. And then New England would New England get, I'm just curious, it doesn't matter for the Broncos purposes, but would New England get the number one? They would, because
Yes.
they would still be a game up on
Over the
Jacksonville.
Chargers.
Yeah.
And yeah, Jacksonville. I don't know who has the tiebreaker over Jacksonville and the Chargers on top of my head, but you would be going into either one of those teams and say, if you do lose, you just lost to them.
Yeah. I think this is a type of, I know one game, because it's the NFL, what causes wild swings in perception, but really I think it's more warranted in this case because one, I think there were, to your point, a lot of real things in there that Jacksonville did that can give the Broncos problems, but also because of how late in the season it is, right? If this winning streak was ended after, let's say, 7, then it's like, okay, well, still got plenty of time, all this kind of stuff. And now you're looking at it, you got 2 weeks left. And I think Steve Kornacki was doing the math yesterday. I took a picture of this. So the Broncos entering yesterday had a 78% chance of getting the number 1 seed. Now it's down to 42% with New England at 40. And that doesn't even include your scenario of how far the Broncos can actually drop. So I think not panic. And I don't think you're trying to incite panic, but
you're not. And it's important.
But there's real consequence to a loss like that at that time in the season.
Yeah, 100%. And it's almost better if you would have lost to the Packers than the Jags. But just because Jacksonville, if the Patriots were to lose one of the next 2 weeks and the Broncos somehow were to lose to the Chiefs and beat the Chargers, then the Jags would get the number 1 seed.
Yeah.
Just win 2 games and you don't have to worry about it. You get a week off and that'd be good.
Yeah. Yeah. Guy get past Chris Oladokun and the pesky Kansas City Chiefs.
Hold on. By the way, I want to ask you something.
Yeah. I figured that we would get into this subject at some point. So go ahead.
All right. So I'm guessing you saw the new stadium.
Yes.
Going from Missouri and Arrowhead to Kansas.
Mm-hmm.
There's no place like home, huh?
I'm not directly answering your question, but I'll get there. So I know when something is a kind of a big deal from other people, when my ex-wife is the one that's texting me about the Chiefs moving, asking me my thoughts on it. And we don't even really talk that much. I don't think it's that big of a deal because I am born and raised in Colorado. I would prefer Kansas City move out of Kansas City to Colorado Springs so I can go down to Widener Field and watch the Chiefs play. So I am not the right person to ask. I do not care if they play in Missouri or Kansas, and I might have my membership.
Pretty close though, right there. It's just over the border, so it's just
right. But look, I think it's a little silly. But remember, there were people up in Denver complaining that the Broncos might play in Greenwood Village or something like that, and it's like that's at least Chiefs fans that are in Missouri are saying they're moving to a different state. There were people in Denver upset that they would move into a suburb of Denver rather than before the whole Burnham Yard thing came up. So I don't get it, but there are people much more passionate about the subject than I
I'm a
am.
passionate guy on NFL stadiums being in the downtowns instead of the
Mhm.
suburbs because the suburbs is parking lots, and I hate stadiums that are just parking lots. I want stuff to do. Like Coors Field is the
Mhm.
ultimate location because you got Blake Street right there, you got bars, you got things to do. Like I'm from New Orleans, the Superdome is right in the heart of the city. It's perfect. If you got to drive 45 minutes to Santa Clara for the Super Bowl, and like it's terrible. It's a deterrent.
Mhm.
Um, and it also seems like the Broncos' perfect ownership situation, paying for their own stadium. I saw
Yeah.
what $700 million are going to
It,
taxpayers.
it it's absolutely ridiculous. And I saw the tweet from Mike Kliss, and I like Mike a lot. He's and there's no but here. Like I'm 100% in agreement with him. The way that the that the Walton Penner Group has done this is absolutely the right way to do it. And that's why I say if they want to move to, Lone Tree, let them move to Lone Tree. They're financing this by themselves. And I know people in St. Louis hate Stan Kroenke, but you got to admit, unless you have ties to that area, he did it right by paying for that monstrosity of SoFi all by himself. The fact that the Hunts or Clark Hunt wants taxpayer money, it's just ridiculous. You taxpayers should not be paying for a stadium, and even more.
100%.
Yeah, they should not be. It's
Like you
ridiculous.
look at Las Vegas
Mm-hmm.
struggling right now because of that kind of stuff.
Yeah, you can't do it if you don't have the money to build a new stadium, then you don't, or you sell the team. And I'm not a fan. I said this when the Broncos were getting ready to be sold or maybe being sold. I said I'm not a fan of these scions taking over. And I know you know this well. I don't know how you feel about what has happened in New Orleans.
Yeah.
Not a child taking over the organization, but the spouse taking over the organization. I'm not a big fan of it. And part of it is exacerbated by the fact that it costs so much more now to build a stadium that I feel like some of these sons, daughters, wives, they just don't have the pockets to be able to build a stadium. And to that, I say, don't ask the taxpayer. You sell your interest in the team to someone who can afford the stadium.
Yeah, exactly. Because all their net worth is tied to the team. They don't have the liquid cash.
And Clark Hunt's a perfect example of that.
Yeah, same thing with Gail Benson. So
yeah, but we can agree that it's not more ridiculous than the Chicago Bears.
Oh, dude, Northwest Indiana.
That
what
is.
are we doing here, the Gary Bears? Are you good?
It's not Gary. Is it really Gary? I saw some of the memes.
I don't know,
it's
man.
not Gary,
I just made that up.
Yeah,
the South Bend Fighting Irish Bears.
That is, and the week, Corey, and I know that we're getting
the biggest game
avenue of not local, but the biggest game in your franchise's recent history, and Kevin Warren is floating the idea of this team moving to Indiana, and then they go out and win the game. By the way, in what was
Ben Johnson and the best throw of the year by Caleb Williams. I mean,
and now the reality, they had that 3-4 hour respite from it, and now in Chicago sports talk radio, they're probably talking about the idea of the Bears moving to Indiana again. That is the most ridiculous development. But what's happening in Kansas? I feel for people, and I think it's dumb that Clark Hunt feels like he needs to have taxpayer money, but I'm not,
Can there be a part-time player owner like Jackie Moon?
Right. Yeah. I might be taking on that. We'll see. I mean, there are plans to overthrow Clark Hunt as the owner of the Kansas City Chiefs. And if that were to happen, not that I'm endorsing it, but if that were to happen, then yes, maybe I would be on a short list of people to take over.
Well, I'm talking about Patrick Mahomes, player, coach, owner. Okay.
Oh, I thought you were talking about, yeah.
No, Jackie Moon.
Him too. Yeah, he could do that. I mean, he's everything else for this team, as Sunday was a perfect example. I mean, just hand Patrick Mahomes the MVP right now. Look at that team without him.
Him and Joe Burrow, dude.
Yeah.
No, I would say Josh Allen as well if he ever got hurt.
Yeah. Yeah. That's
And maybe Taylor Swift could own the Chiefs.
now she really could.
I'm telling you.
Yeah. And then, but then it would get messy because she would install Travis Kelce as the GM, and that would be nepotism, and that would get a little messy. She certainly
Yeah,
has
Gridiron Heights is y'all's not Gridiron Heights. What's the podcast?
New Heights,
Jason Kelce.
Arlington Heights. I
Yeah.
don't know what it's called.
Yeah, New Heights.
New Heights.
Jason and y'all would have a great offensive defensive line.
Yeah, it's gone. It's quite amazing how in one season it has gone from the Chiefs being the royal family, and we're bringing on Caitlin Clark and Taylor Swift, and we're going to another Super Bowl, and now it's Chris Oladokun, and the team's moving to Kansas. It happened that fast.
There's
Life
no
comes
place
fast.
like home.
Yeah, that's right, buddy. Appreciate the time and the insight. We'll chat soon.
Sounds good. Appreciate you.
Yeah, see it. That's Corey Roldan. I'll be on with him tonight on KKTV. Yeah, we don't have time to get all into it today, but the Chicago Bears stuff is nuts, and I've laid down my official position on the Chiefs. I'm not the right person to ask. I am the right person to ask about taxpayer money. I have a deep-seated feeling about that. I don't think you should be asking taxpayers for money. But in terms of the Chiefs being, if Clark Hunt were to fund the stadium in Kansas himself, I wouldn't care. Like I said, I'd rather they play right outside my window. I didn't grow up in Missouri. Anyway, we'll get back to local sports next. How about that? The one statement win that was made not at the expense of a Colorado team, but by a Colorado team. That's next. It was a weekend of statement victories, either at the expense of Colorado teams or by Colorado teams. Let's talk about the latter just to kind of counterbalance the conversation we've had to this point. We'll get back into the Broncos. Do not fret. But I want to talk about what the Avs did yesterday in the time I have left in this hour. And let me remind you, the last time that the Avalanche played the Wild, which seems like an eternity ago, it was before the Wild were on the winning streak that they were on right now, I believe. But it certainly was before they landed Quinn Hughes, which things have changed a little bit in terms of the perception of the Wild after that trade. But the Avs were beaten by a Wild team led by a rookie goaltender named Jesper Wellstedt. And Jesper Wellstedt, after that game, because everybody looks at the Avs as a measuring stick game, except maybe Dallas, maybe Edmonton. But that's certainly one that if you think highly of yourself as a hockey team, you circle when the Avs are coming into town or when you go to Denver. Because that's a game where you can, not to sound like Channing Tatum from Deadpool Wolverine, but make a name for yourself. And Jesper Wellstedt, to his credit, he did. And then he said something that maybe he shouldn't have said. Now, I don't begrudge him for saying that, because if you don't believe in yourself, no one will. But what he said was, when asked about what the Wild beating the Avalanche means, he said, quote, "It kind of says that we're a better team than them." Not exactly. Right? I mean, there could be bad matchups, as we'll get back into with the Broncos and the Jags. You could be catching a team on, a second night of a back-to-back or at the end of the long road trip. Like, it doesn't necessarily just mean that. I mean, that's the easy takeaway, but it's probably more nuanced than that. But again, I don't fault the guy for saying it. Right? And I'm sure that that quote went over pretty well with the Wild fan base. So I don't begrudge it. But when you're a team like the Avalanche that has the ability of the Colorado Avalanche, you can, how should I put this? You can send messages. Like, the Avs have that ability to, on any given night, if they're locked in, if they're at the top of their game, they can kind of beat you down. Sure seems like yesterday was one of those games. With Jesper Wellstedt in net, the Colorado Avalanche put 4 goals on him and beat the Minnesota Wild with Quinn Hughes, that were on a 7-game winning streak, by a 5-1 score. The last one was an empty netter. So, feels like they kind of showed who they were against the Minnesota Wild yesterday. Here was Nathan MacKinnon perhaps lending a little credence to the idea of the Avalanche knowing what Jesper Wellstedt said the last time they played.
It was a big one. They played yesterday. Obviously, that's tough. It's a tough back-to-back for them, Edmonton, than us. But sometimes you feel good on the second day, so you never know what we were going to get. And we were definitely excited for this. Had a good meeting this morning, and just wanted to outplay them and get this win, and we did that.
Yeah. So, what were they more looking forward to? I think it's a few different things. Yes, I think the Wellstedt thing. Look, if Liam Cohen is going to clap back at Sean Payton about an innocuous comment about how Jacksonville's a small market, I got to believe at least some members of the Avalanche, number 29 most notably, would know that Jesper Wellstead said what he said after that game. So I don't think that the Avalanche didn't think twice about what Jesper Wellstead said after the Wild beat the Avs. Also, there's the aspect of the Avs don't lose to many teams. Certainly in regulation, but just period, they don't lose to a lot of teams. So if you have a chance to get them back for that reason, great. And if I were cutting up the pie here, I think I might put the perception of the Minnesota Wild post Quinn Hughes as the number one reason. That was a division rival that got a lot better. As good as Minnesota is, and they're a good hockey team, adding Quinn Hughes is a force multiplier. And they've done nothing but win since he's put on a Minnesota Wild jersey. I think that was, more than anything else, the reason why the Avs were looking forward to that game. Because there was a conversation that has been happening in hockey circles about how now Minnesota has now stepped onto the same stage as Dallas and Colorado. That is now a 3-team race, 3 Stanley Cup contenders in the Central Division, and I think that has grabbed the attention of the Avs, and they wanted to show something. I mean, they don't have, other than their march toward history in setting the single season point record, I mean, how many other things can they accomplish during the regular season, right? So when an opportunity presents itself with all of those things, you're going to get the best out of the Colorado Avalanche. And they were at their best, and they dominated the Minnesota Wild. So were they into sending a statement? I think they are. But what I can speak to with the utmost knowledge is that what that win did was send a message. Minnesota has gotten much more interesting with the addition of Quinn Hughes, no doubt about that. And now you could argue 4 of the best 5 defensemen in the world all reside in the Central Division. So credit to Minnesota. They're going all in, and they made themselves much better. But there are levels to this. And even with Quinn Hughes, Minnesota, to me, is not on the same level as Dallas and Colorado. And Colorado was able to show that yesterday afternoon. 719-24-7-1313. Coming up next, back to the Broncos and the Jaguars and why you can't completely shrug this loss off as just a bad day to have a bad day. Welcome in hour 2 on this Monday. Great to have you. Appreciate you watching the show on our social media platforms, YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. The handle is the same in all of those places at XTRA Sports 1300. While you are there, like, subscribe, and most importantly, drop a comment so I can get to it like I'm getting to Brian's right now. This comes in from the Facebook live stream. Says, of all the games Nick Benito chose to not show up for, he chose this one. Facepalm emoji. Yeah, not a good game from Nick Benito, and he owned up to it. He used an expletive to describe his play. But that's kind of the trick here with this game. Separating fact from fiction, separating what is real about yesterday and what isn't. What is something that you could expect to happen again if the Broncos play the Jaguars, and what you can't. One thing I will say right off the top, even though Brian is spot on, I do not expect the next time Jacksonville and Denver gets together that Nick Benito is a complete non-factor. Like, that's one thing in the Broncos column that I can say, if they played again, that's going to be better. But there are some things about this Jaguars team that attacks the vulnerabilities of the Denver Broncos. But first, let's hear from Bo Nix on what happened on Sunday.
We got hit in the mouth today, and they played a good game. And, we let it get away, but you'd rather have it hit you now than the first round of the playoffs. And, wouldn't call it a wake-up call because we were playing well. It's just one of those that'll reset you and put you back and get you back to, where you need to be. It'll put you in a good mindset if you'll let it.
But I agree with Bo Nix, but that's also why yesterday's result can't be taken lightly. And Bo Nix said it right there. This isn't about an overconfident Denver Bronco team overlooking the lowly Jacksonville Jaguars. They knew what to expect. There's just aspects of this team that give the Broncos trouble. And it's not that they weren't pointed out all last week by Sean Payton, most notably. One is the defense. Since you just heard from Bo Nix, let's start there. This is a defense that all season has thrived on their ability to create turnovers. Second in the league in turnovers forced. And the Broncos gave them the ball twice. That can't happen against a team like the Jacksonville Jaguars. Bo Nix cannot do that thing where he stares down a receiver and throws it right to a DB that, as Sean Payton pointed out last week, have great ball skills and can pick off passes. Unlike some of the teams that reside in the NFL. Jacksonville thrives on that, and the Broncos played right into their hands with the fumble on the exchange between Bo Nix and was it R.J. Harvey and the interception. And the Jaguars already are a team that force an opposing quarterback to fool them. Right? Sean Payton talked about this last week. Because they play a lot of zone, they're looking right at the quarterback. And Bo Nix's interception is a perfect example of what you absolutely cannot do against this team. You can't tell them where you're going with your eyes because they're looking right at you. They don't have their back turned to you. Guy gets past him. All right, I got help over the top. Guy cuts across the formation. That's now his guy. Right? They play a lot of zone. They're looking right at Bo Nix. He has to do a better job of looking them off. And he's in more than anything else, you just can't throw it to a guy that is heavily covered. I mean, you could see that interception coming from a mile away. You're like, oh, he's throwing it to the sideline. There's a guy cutting wide open underneath, and Bo Nix looks, even through your TV screen, you could tell he's looking out to the sideline. And as soon as he let it go, you're like, oh, no. So, yes, you could characterize that as Bo Nix and the Denver Broncos playing into Jacksonville's hands, but let's give a little bit of credit to Jacksonville. The book is out on them. Everybody can regurgitate exactly what Sean Payton said. Everyone knows what to expect from the Jacksonville defense. At this point in the season, you do have to give credit to the opponent for, even though you know in your mind, I shouldn't do this, and you do it anyway. So that's where it's both things, right? It's on Bo Nix. He's got to be better in that regard. But it's also credit to Jacksonville because they've been doing this. Patrick Mahomes on their Monday Night Football game, pick six, helped completely turn that game around. That's Jacksonville Jaguar football this year. And they do this to almost everyone. Kind of like the Broncos, where they're winning within the margins, right? Third down, red zone, all of these things that have led to all of these close wins. That's who they are. Who Jacksonville is? A team that changes the game through their ability to create turnovers. And they created two of them. Or if you want to say the Broncos gave them two turnovers, okay. But it's the last thing you can do against the Jacksonville Jaguar defense is give the ball away. And that will, if these two teams met again, or if there are other teams in the AFC playoffs that take notes or play a similar style of defense than Jacksonville does, you have to worry a little bit about how the Broncos offense will fare at crucial moments against that defense as well. But the number one thing I look at, the defense is certainly something that would give you pause, that would concern you a little bit if these two teams were to meet in the playoffs. Talking about Jacksonville's defense. But my biggest takeaway and the thing about Jacksonville that can give the Broncos problems that not many teams can, it's Trevor Lawrence. It's Trevor Lawrence. The mobility that Trevor Lawrence has, coupled with the ability to throw the football, is what has given the Broncos over the last couple of years some problems. The rollout on 3rd and 9 on their first TD drive. Later in the drive, the run on 2nd down and 6, the 3rd and 1 run to keep the go-ahead touchdown drive going. The touchdown itself, the 3rd and 8 run late in the game. Trevor Lawrence's ability to escape out of the pocket and go off to the races is something that, if the team has that ability with the quarterback position, can beat the Broncos defense. Now, how many teams have that ability? Well, Buffalo has that ability. New England has a little bit of that ability. Basically, when you talk about in today's day and age, the best quarterbacks in the league, except for probably Joe Burrow, the best quarterbacks in the league all have that in their toolbox. Justin Herbert, Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson. Think of the quarterbacks who have beaten the Denver Broncos over the last couple of years. Those are the names. Why? In part because of their mobility, but in large part because they're really good quarterbacks. And Trevor Lawrence, I would put in the same tier as Bo Nix. Right? Trevor Lawrence is not Mahomes, Allen, Lamar, Burrow. Right? He's not at that level. He was supposed to be, but he has never been consistent enough to be that. However, just like Bo Nix, just like Jared Goff, just like Brock Purdy and Baker Mayfield, some of these other quarterbacks that are on the same tier, they can't consistently raise their game to that level, but every once in a while they can. And Trevor Lawrence has done it, and he's done it in the postseason. Just ask any Charger fan. So he's not going to be able to do it week in and week out. And you would say overall this season that Bo Nix has been the better quarterback. You really can. Look, if you just want to start with the stats, Bo Nix has been superior to Trevor Lawrence. But what do I keep saying about Bo Nix? What is my concern about Bo Nix? What he's been doing in the regular season is fine. But there will come a time where more is required. And that is the postseason. And we have not seen, even though we've seen Bo Nix elevate his game in the biggest moments that this regular season has provided, the Philadelphia fourth quarter against Philadelphia, fourth quarter against the Giants, the game against Kansas City. We've seen Bo Nix elevate his game, and it gives you hope if you're a Broncos fan that he's capable of doing it on the biggest stage. But to be fair, we haven't seen it yet. But there will come a time, and we were having this conversation on Friday, there will come a time where what Bo Nix is consistently will not be enough for the Broncos to win. And can Bo Nix be more? Trevor Lawrence has shown that he can be more in the playoffs. Bo Nix hasn't. And some of that, I fully understand, is unfair to Bo Nix. The guy's played one playoff game. I understand that. But it's a valid concern when you haven't seen it. So in so many games in the NFL, whether it's the regular season or the playoffs, you usually lean the direction of the better quarterback. But even more often than that, you look back on it, why a team wins and loses. Far more often than not, their quarterback plays better. And I have seen Trevor Lawrence outplay Justin Herbert in a playoff game. Yeah, it's not Josh Allen. It's not Mahomes. It's not Lamar Jackson. But has Bo Nix done that? So though the defense is one thing, and that's a mostly Jacksonville thing. Right? The way they play defense, they thrive on turnovers. They create turnovers more than anybody but one other team. Right? So it's not that the Broncos are going to have a minefield littered with teams that turn teams over like Jacksonville does. Right? So that would be more of a concern if Jacksonville and Denver were to meet up again. But the thing about yesterday that does apply to some of the other teams that will be in the AFC playoffs with the Denver Broncos is that ability as a quarterback to raise their game to an elite level. You want to know how to beat the Denver Broncos defense? As elite as they are, be an elite quarterback. Like, that's the simplest way. And the list of those guys that are capable is very small. And you've seen the Broncos defense feast on guys that aren't on that list. But Trevor Lawrence can elevate his game. And there are guys in these playoffs, quarterbacks in these playoffs, Josh Allen, that have done it consistently. And that's always has been since we really started to get into the playoff conversation and dare I say the Super Bowl conversation when it comes to the Denver Broncos, my biggest concern I keep going back to is Bo Nix capable of elevating his game, which is a requirement to get to a Super Bowl. We can talk about regular season Jalen Hurts all we want. When the playoffs roll around, Jalen Hurts is the poster child for this. Jalen Hurts during the regular season, you don't even want him on your football team. Jalen Hurts in the playoffs looks like a demigod. Now, I'm not saying with everything else Denver has that Bo Nix has to play at that level, but he's going to have to elevate his game above what is standard for Bo Nix. And on the other sideline, you saw that yesterday. A quarterback that is able to elevate his game to another level, to not only outplay his counterpart, but to be able to run right through one of the best defenses in the league. So, as Bo Nix said, better to happen now than in the playoffs. Now there are no secrets when it comes to the Jacksonville Jaguars. But there still are some things that if these two teams were to meet, or if there's another team that has some of the ingredients that Jacksonville has, where you can be a little bit concerned if you are a Denver Broncos fan. 719-247-1313. Take your reaction to the 34-20 loss by the Denver Broncos. Broncos 11-game win streak gone after a 34-20 loss yesterday to the Jacksonville Jaguars. Anybody else have flashbacks of January 97? I did a little bit. And the mobility of Trevor Lawrence that was on display yesterday reminded me a little bit of what gave the Broncos fits back in that divisional playoff game in 97 with Mark Brunell. There are, with the limited history, because here's what it is, right? With the limited history that any team, quite frankly, has with the Jacksonville Jaguars, I would imagine that the vast majority of fan bases in the NFL have no recollection of any notable happenings where their team crossed paths with the Jacksonville Jaguars. Right? The other team that came in the same year, Carolina, with the Broncos, there is only happy memories. But it's only, go ahead, name one other matchup that the Broncos have had with Jacksonville other than 1997. They played each other. Nothing notable happened because it hasn't been much in the history of the Jacksonville Jaguars. They had that one year with Bortles and Fournette. They had the year where they beat the Broncos, and then they had the furious second half rally against the Chargers. And then that's about it. So it just so happens that one of the three notable things that has happened in the Jaguar franchise has happened to the Denver Broncos. But yeah, I was thinking a lot about that game. That was a shocker. That was more shocking than yesterday. I think we can certainly agree on that. Jacksonville's a good team. And there are a lot of things that I pointed out, that Sean Payton pointed out, that Jacksonville does well that could give the Broncos some problems. But the question is, what do you make of this game? Not for Thursday. Thursday, that go ahead and watch the Nuggets and the Wolves. If you're a fan of the Nuggets and the Broncos, because there's going to be nothing. The Broncos, I fully expect. It might be relatively close because Spagnuolo and Reed, and it's a divisional game, and it's Christmas and all that kind of stuff. Broncos, I'll just say it on Monday, will have no issue with the Kansas City Chiefs on Thursday. Now, 10 days after that, with the Chargers, that's a horse of a different color. But what to make for the Charger game and beyond? The Broncos don't feel as invincible as they felt 48 hours ago. I think that has to be said. When you run a winning streak as long as the Broncos did, that some of that feeling starts to creep in. And I'm talking about your perspective or the media's or other fans' perspective, not the Broncos, because, again, I don't want to harp on the fact, I don't think that was an overconfident Denver team. And the most telling quote that backs me up comes from Sean Payton himself. Today, Sean Payton told the media, quote, "There wasn't a guy in the locker room yesterday that felt like we didn't get beat. This wasn't officiating. This wasn't. We got beat, and Jacksonville was the better team yesterday. I think our players know that. The better team. Not the more focused team. Not the team that had more to play for. The better team." Doesn't mean that the Broncos in the rematch, if it were to pass, can't be the better team. I think they absolutely can. And I think there's a higher chance of it happening now that the motivation, that extra little juice is on the Broncos side of things. But the Jaguars were a better team and in certain aspects of the game, a bad matchup for the Denver Broncos. Take your thoughts. This from the 719. To me, the Broncos look like they have been all year long. It's just this time they played a team that is playing good football. After yesterday, that Packers win doesn't look so great, does it? Look, and you and I agree. We agreed last week on the how good is Bo Nix and is that good enough and all of that kind of stuff. Are we really going to do the thing, though, that this is the only decent team the Broncos have played? Because I thought I debunked that before. Either you have to look at the Philly game, maybe the Kansas City game, and the Packers game. And look, the Packers were down to Malik Willis as their quarterback and still needed almost a miracle from Caleb Williams to DJ Moore to lose that football game. So I'm not going to do the thing where all of a sudden now the Packers win doesn't look as impressive because the Bears beat them. Bears are a good team. So either you have to say that the Broncos have played 4, 5, maybe now you replace Kansas City with the Chargers. I mean, how does everyone feel about the Colts loss now? The Broncos have good wins on their schedule. So either Jacksonville is the first good team since the Broncos went on their winning streak to put it all together and beat them, or we just don't need to look at Jacksonville as a good win either, or Jacksonville as a good team. It cuts both ways. And I pointed this out a couple weeks ago. Because of how wide open the NFL is, it doesn't look like anybody's played anybody. You have to trust your eyes. The Broncos are a good team. Jacksonville is a good team. Jacksonville was the better team yesterday. Eagles are a good team. The Broncos beat them. The Chargers are a good team. Broncos lost to them. Like, Jacksonville is not the first good team the Broncos have run up against. It's not. And it's not going to be the last. But again, what I pointed out in terms of where Trevor Lawrence can take his game is problematic for the Broncos, and also what Jacksonville does defensively can be problematic. Jacksonville's a good team and not a great matchup for the Denver Broncos. Albert says, in the immortal words of Anderson Silva, sometimes you win and sometimes you know win. It's a good line. That is true. Adds, winning 12 games in a row in the NFL is so difficult. The Broncos were going to lose before 17 straight wins. I agree with you on that. Better now with 2 games to get back on the track. Yeah, and I agree 100% with what you said, and I talked about this on Friday. The feeling of it's definitely going to come to an end at some point. The Broncos were getting into very rarefied air. And that air would get even thinner, no pun intended, if they were to end the regular season without dropping a game in 14 straight. And then to win in their first playoff game. And I mean, now we're talking 72 Dolphins. We're talking about the Brady team that eventually ran up against the Giants. Right? Even they didn't do it. One of the most thought to be one of the most unbeatable teams in the history of football, and they couldn't even finish the job. You knew that the Broncos would lose between now and the Super Bowl. They just were. You've watched enough sports to know that. But this allows, not that I think this team wasn't hungry or motivated or any of that kind of stuff. I would like to give Jacksonville credit for just beating the Denver Broncos because I think that's what happened yesterday. But now they got that. We always talk about how could you be, you're making millions of dollars. These are the most important games of the season. All this, you're playing for Super Bowls, all this kind of stuff. How could you possibly need to be more motivated? But yet we talk about it all the time, how teams can get even more motivated to get a little bit. They are human after all. And there's always another gear that we can get to as human beings. And I think the most positive thing that you could take away, other than the fact of what Albert said and what Bo Nix said, being that this game doesn't end the Broncos season. The other thing you could say is if Denver were to beat Jacksonville or play Jacksonville again, your confidence level could go up a little bit knowing that the Broncos will be highly motivated, especially if they run up against Jacksonville, let's say the AFC Championship, and they will have beaten Kansas City and LA and their first round opponent in the playoffs. Like, that would be the one blemish for like 4 months of football. Yeah, they would be highly motivated to take on Jacksonville. But there's some X's and O's things. There's some football things here that the Broncos have to be better at, or else they're going to suffer the same fate if they meet up with the Jaguars again. And let's also not forget that there are 5 other teams that may get the Broncos, or I guess 6. Again, I don't want to, make the Chiefs out. Chiefs will be easy, but the Chargers, once in the regular season and maybe again in the playoffs. You got Buffalo, you got New England, Houston. You don't think they're taking notes? So I think the overall tone here is all is not lost. You don't need to, rethink your entire reality that you've been living in. The Jaguars are a good team. Give them credit for being a good team. Broncos are still going to be a playoff team. But this idea that they were going to coast, if you were under that misconception already, well, now you're kind of shaken from it. I was not under that misconception. I thought that there were multiple teams in the AFC playoff field that might be able to beat the Denver Broncos, depending on venue. Jacksonville has to be considered one of them now. 719-247-1313. Remember, we got Monday Night Football coming up at the top of the hour. So if you got some pressing thoughts when it comes to the Broncos that you want to get off your chest today, now is the time to call or text in at 719-247-1313. If not, I would like to discuss the possibility, nay, probability, that the Denver Nuggets have a new short-term rival. Welcome back. Drive Time Sports. Monday Night Football starts at the top of the hour. Colts and Niners, if you are interested. Nuggets also in action tonight. They are taking on the Jazz. So take your pick there. Speaking of the Denver Nuggets, I want to give some of my thoughts before they have another game and how quickly the world turns in the NBA and the NHL. There's another game coming. So if you want to get your thoughts out, get them out now before something else happens. The best movies have the best villains. You ever notice that? If you love a movie, then I'm not saying you have affinity for the villain, but the best movies have the best villains. Right? Sometimes it's the only reason to watch a movie is because of the villain. I mean, think about it. Star Wars. Without Darth Vader, you get, the prequels and the newer ones, which, according to my son, who's a bigger Star Wars fan than I am, not nearly as good as the originals. Marvel movies, right? Part of the reason why Marvel has fallen off is not because the Avengers are broken up or whatever. Thor got another movie. There's no point in these people in movies. Villains aren't as good. Although Christian Bale tried to save that garbage Thor movie as much as he could. Even Christian Bale could not save that from being a terrible, terrible movie. But without Christian Bale as the villain, I would have walked out of the theater. Villains make the movies. Even more respected. I don't want to say respected. More movies that are more auteur than the big blockbusters, right? Silence of the Lambs. No one cares about Clarice. It's about Hannibal Lecter. No Country for Old Men, Anton Chigurh. One of the best movie villains of all time. Mean Girls. I mean, a great villain makes a great movie. And it can elevate what is already a compelling story. The Regina George of the NBA, Kevin Durant, is going to make the Rockets-Nuggets rivalry, however long it might last, better than the Wolves-Nuggets rivalry that only lasted a couple years. He's a better villain than Anthony Edwards is. You know why? Because he's more unlikable. Way more unlikable than Anthony Edwards. You hear Anthony Edwards trash talk and you're amused by it. You laugh at it. There's something endearing about Anthony Edwards. When Kevin Durant is in his full mean girl phase, like he was on Saturday, he is incredibly unlikable at the highest level. Even more than that other guy that everybody likes to make out to be the biggest villain. When Kevin Durant wants to be, he puts on that black hat and he is as big of a villain as anybody. And he is the embodiment, as much as anybody, of the player entitlement era. How many coaches has he gotten fired? How many fan bases has he deserted? I mean, overall, I like Kevin Durant, but there's like this side of him that it makes you absolutely hate the guy if he's wearing a different uniform than yours. And Bruce Brown found out firsthand just how mean Kevin Durant can get.
It's been cool, but I think it's been cut slow now. It's after tonight. Some words were said that's a little disrespectful, so Well, I can't wait to see him next time.
What exactly was said?
Next question.
Now, if you wanted to go on Twitter and find out what Kevin Durant said, there's a video out there. Called him something that in a more tame way would precede the word cat. There are some other people hypothesizing what that button is for Bruce Brown. I don't want to get too into internet rumor mongering, but there's something about Bruce Brown in his past that maybe Kevin Durant brought up. I'll let you, surf the web on your own for that. But Kevin Durant can cut to the core with his trash talk, and he says that it's all a part of the game.
Definitely wanted to cross the line tonight.
Yeah.
That's basketball. It's in between the lines. Ain't no respect, ain't no love, nothing. And people don't show love to me. They cross the line a lot with their physicality. You know what I'm saying? It's part of the game. Some people can talk and play. Some people can't. I had to learn how to talk and play as a player. So I think Bruce is probably learning the same thing.
There are lines that can be crossed, and maybe KD did cross one. But his overall point, I agree with. One thing that has been lacking, especially in the NBA, is a healthy amount of sports hate. Right? The kind of stuff that you saw on display between Bird and Magic at its peak. It doesn't get any better than that rivalry. Even what permeated throughout the 90s. Right? It's healthy. This isn't the real world here. This is sports. And sports hate is a good thing. And as long as Kevin Durant didn't cross the line, which he may have, I'm okay with it. And it spices up this, do we call it a rivalry? Whatever this is, because it's only going to last as long as Kevin Durant is in Houston, which, given his prior history, might be just this season. But for this year, move over Minnesota, Denver, it's Denver, Houston. And Kevin Durant is a big reason for that. And it's one of the lesser talked about reasons why Kevin Durant is such a great fit for the Houston Rockets. Like, we could talk about, in basketball terms, them needing a go-to scorer and, someone to look to, somebody that has playoff experience, all that kind of stuff. That was most of the conversation when KD went to Houston. But also that stuff, the trash talk, the mentality, the wearing the black hat proudly, playing the role of the villain. Houston needs that. They need that a little bit too. And Kevin Durant provides it. And don't forget, in order to get Kevin Durant, they got rid of Dillon Brooks. Right? Different. And Dillon Brooks can bring a little bit of this, but there's only so far he can go. Kevin Durant's trash talk cuts a little bit deeper when, like on Saturday, he's hitting big shot after big shot to bury your team, which Dillon Brooks could never do. So you're getting kind of some Dillon Brooks, but you're also getting one of the most skilled scorers that we've ever seen. And a big-time player on the biggest of stages. So he's a great fit and was absolutely needed for this Houston Rockets team. But that wasn't the only psychological warfare that Houston was employing on Saturday in their 115-101 win over the Denver Nuggets. I told you this on Tuesday. I told you this. Ime Udoka's comments about how bad the game was officiated and how Zach Zarba was starstruck. It wasn't just about that game. It was about Saturday and beyond. And wouldn't you know it, Ime Udoka's comments carried weight. David Adelman confirming what I believed all week, that there would be times where maybe some makeup calls were in effect.
It felt like a reactionary game earlier in the week. That's what it felt like to me. It felt like they had one foul, with 5 minutes to go in the second quarter. And I just felt like both teams were playing so hard, extremely hard, physical. I give the Rockets so much credit. They crash the glass every time. And then we get two somewhat soft fouls on our best player, which leads to him fouling twice that are fouls, and that leads to 4 fouls. He's got to come out of the game. So honestly, I was confused. And so I was just looking for answers. And I went out there to find them, and turns out I had to leave.
Now, that's a tame way of putting it. David Adelman went berserker on the officials on Saturday and got rightly ejected from the game. He got fined yesterday, he got fined for not leaving the court in a timely manner. Like, David Adelman lost his mind. Like, let's call it what it is. But it was a direct result of what Ime Udoka said on Monday night. Anyone who has followed basketball for more than a year knew exactly what Ime Udoka was doing. And to his credit, it worked. Now, I'm not going to say that it was completely lopsided the other way, because it wasn't. But there were times where he went, that's what did David Adelman call it? A reactionary game? Yeah, there were a lot of moments in that game where it felt reactionary. Ime Udoka wouldn't have done what he did on Monday if it didn't work. Referees, like coaches and players, are human. Ime Udoka went to the oldest trick in the book that has been used by Phil Jackson and Steve Kerr and Greg Popovich and some of the best who have ever done it. He planted the seeds that would bear fruit just a few days later, and they did. Now, where I stand on all of this, I know it's going to sound like this is giving the Rockets a leg up, but I don't care, because we have to be fair to the situation. I want the players to decide the game. And that's what the Rockets want. The Rockets, not only do they want it, they need to have the officials swallow the whistle. They need to be allowed to be physical. They can't hang with the Denver Nuggets in a 7-game series if they're not allowed to be physical. And that's not me trying to knock the Rockets. It's who they are. It's their identity. And if you're not allowed to play that way, and some teams are built that way, some teams aren't. I happen to kind of like the way that the Houston Rockets play basketball. But if they're not allowed to do that, you're kind of tying one arm behind their back. They have constructed their team to play a certain way, and if they're not allowed to do it, and it's nothing egregious, the egregious calls, everyone wants the egregious calls to be called. Just the ones where you're kind of on the fence, just let it go. Now, I didn't see enough of that on Saturday either, so I don't know if this is really benefiting the Houston Rockets as much as it may seem. But I just want them to be allowed to play. I don't want cheap fouls. I don't want the stars in foul trouble, and I don't want the last 2 minutes of the game to take a half an hour. And when these teams meet up on March 11th, and then when they meet up seemingly inevitably for a 7-game series, I want the Nuggets to have to battle through what the Rockets present. I don't want David Adelman and Ime Udoka going back and forth in the media I just want the referees to come in and be consistent and consistently let the players play. I want the Nuggets to be able to play through that and beat the Houston Rockets. And it's the same with Minnesota, and it's the same with OKC. Because now that I mentioned those other teams, don't you notice that there's starting to be a pattern here? What Minnesota did to the Nuggets gave them problems. Then OKC did it. Now Houston's doing it. There is a thought out there that you can bully the Denver Nuggets. Houston physically, and now with KD psychologically. Nuggets have got to be able to answer that back in a 7-game series. Without the referee's help. March 11th, Houston and Denver again. Looking forward to it. That'll be it for today. Appreciate your interaction. My thanks to Corey Roldan for joining me. I'll be joining him on KKTV tonight at 10, so tune in for that. I will be back with you tomorrow at 3. For now, enjoy Monday Night Football, Colts and Niners here on Extra Sports 1300.